Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks out there. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and welcome to Third Pillar Thursday. Third Pillar Thursday is exclusively related to the third pillar of tabletop RPG gaming. It is the atrophied muscle, the forgotten lore. It is the mistreated stepchild of tabletop RPG games, the third pillar. The first two pillars being generally combat and social interactions as our pillars of gaming. But for here, this channel, in Third Pillar Thursday, the third pillar of gaming is using the environment, with the environment representing a character in your setting. It is the both narrative and mechanical elements of using the environment. It is your layers and obstacles, hazards, traps, puzzles, and so many other things, all wrapped up together. And we're here to talk about it and how to utilize it in your game. Now, of course, this is we are talking about this within the context of our weekly subject, and our weekly subject today is the Caldera. Glad you can join us there, Cameron. For those who don't know, this show is TriCast over on Twitch, YouTube, and our Discord server. If you join the Discord, we also broadcast there, both audio and video on all three platforms, so you may participate that way live. And of course, we always accept the fact that, even after the show, you drop in a comment, question, heck, even your comment may even become a weekly subject on this channel. All right, so let's get into it. The Caldera, in general, for concerning tabletop gaming, maybe not necessarily scientifically, but it's basically the idea of a dormant volcano with the basin, the top portion of it, filled with water and or fluids thereof. Now, of course, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Monster Monday, Discord Tuesday, World Building Wednesday, we talked a lot about some of the cool elements, the dangerous elements of it, but I thought we could talk about some locations in and around the Caldera that would be really cool for storytelling, because that's what Third Pillar Thursday is all about. So of course, a volcanic mountain of aperture of any size is dangerous in itself when we start talking about climbing and altitudes and such, right? Now, from a distance, of course, if you do a little Google search and look up calderas or even volcanoes, many times they happen to look like, from a distance, an angled peak, right? Like looking at a mountain from a distance. But they can be very difficult to scale, and just the idea of scaling any kind of mountainous region, of course, very common especially in fantasy gaming, or even exploration in modern day or science fiction. But of course, it can be very dangerous to utilize in a game, based on the kind of rule set you want to use. How from cinematic to extremely gritty in your world, you're going to have to pull out some rules or talk with your players about failing attempts to climb, if you want to include the yes and no but type of results that some other games have, where you're like failing forward, or you are succeeding with some kind of consequence, or you might want to include something like that, especially when it comes to a far more cinematic style of gaming when it comes to climbing, such as reaching for a rock or an outcrop, or scaling a rope and it breaks and then you fall and able to grab a handhold, or you're climbing a high distance and the rocks are starting to tumble or crumble above you, which creates its own hazard, or an NPC or one of your allies starts to fall and you're lashed together with ropes. How difficult is it to hold on to them while you're wedged into a rock and their weight suddenly pulls against your rope and then you go falling? So, yes, the old classic Dungeons and Dragons was basically save or die, right? You make a climb check, and you failed. You fall to your death, right? Or maybe conversely, the proverbial cinematic version of it, which is like, oh, terminal velocity 20d6. My character could survive that, right? If we can find some middle ground in there, some nuance and such, I think it would be really cool to include that in your games as well. The idea that you guys, anyone who's watched me for any amount of time, understands that while I love using the environment, I have a particular dislike of traps as they are done classically. They tend to be gotchas on one side of the GM screen or the other, and neither resultant side enjoys it. Either player characters avoid your traps and your traps become useless, or the player characters succumb to your traps and the player feel like it's just a resource drain, right? As opposed to it telling the story of where they're located. And I'm always for using the third pillar as a method to immerse the players in the danger and the setting, the story that you're trying to tell within that region, right? Most boring encounters can be changed just by, what is the word for real estate? Location, right? Having a fist fight or a sword fight or two people blasting each other or whatever, having a fight that's very boring on a flat plane tends to be that way. But change that and let's say that same fist fight is happening while there's the rumbling of a volcanic activity or geological change. If they're fighting on ropes dangling off the side of a mountaintop, if they're fighting on the precipice of a plateau that's crumbling beneath them, and at any moment while these two are having a titanic battle from a long held rivalry, that at any moment now the pillar they're standing on could crumble away and they must jump and leap to another pillar that's just a fingertips distance away from them at their longest reach or something. So changing the environment, I think, and having it act in dynamic ways, of course, always helps. At the end of this show, I'll give you some examples of, just as we have combat, melee combat, ranged combat, grappling, spells, all kinds of things, being tripped and being knocked unconscious, being pierced and bleeding and such. Just as we have different types of social interactions, whether it's carousing, seduction, persuasion, entertainment, threats, interrogations, those kind of things. The same goes for the environment. So just before I end the show, I'll give you some examples. There's probably 5 or 6 different methods of using the environment. All right, so we have ourselves using the Caldera from the outside skin, scaling it, climbing it. I'm a big proponent of reframing, reskinning, reusing, repurposing things. And so your classic pit traps, collapsed ceiling traps. 5th edition even has the Indiana Jones rolling ball trap. All of those things could very well be reframed in terms of scaling some kind of geological location, whether it's scaling the outside skin of a caldera, right? Rocks start tumbling down on people. Well, maybe that's a collapsing ceiling or something. And of course, using a ton of conditions works as well. Rocks crumble down on top of the PCs. Are they knocked unconscious, stunned? Are they restrained? Trapped, a arm or leg trapped inside the rock. Have they been? Is this a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing where you're free climbing up and you fall back, but you're pushed back by so many movement parameters, whether you're using squares, 5-foot distances, or you're using zones where maybe scaling the caldera is like a 3 to 8 zone region, and when the player characters, especially if you're using theater of the mind, and maybe they get knocked back to a particular zone and whatnot. So as they ascend, of course, it becomes far more difficult. You're at the base of a mountain, this mountainous region. The angles are much less as they get higher. Maybe there are other elements from the volcanic activity. Lava flows, geysers, hot gases. Again, the rumblings or shaking of the earth. Maybe there are, as lava cools, it may be hot to the touch on the outside with a black crust, but maybe there's a chance that they could break through to the molten lava underneath, which could far more than hot, but literally melting away flesh and bone and such. So that's also a possibility as well. I've got a Twitch bot. Thank you for joining me, Twitch bot. When you as an AI become sentient, you're able to join in. So sure, why not? Aw. Thanks, Dead Man. Thank you very much. Anyway, the idea that you could again reskinning or reflavoring some of the traps. Hell, you could reskin and reflavor creature abilities or something. A pit trap doesn't necessarily have to be a constructed 10-foot square that has a trap door. A pit trap could be anything from walking along fragile earth and falling through. And of course, the classic pit trap also has, what is it? Spikes at the bottom, or poison spikes. Just change the damage potential for falling through a pit trap, right? Instead of falling damage, you suffer fire damage, burning damage from falling into lava, or poison damage from busting open a poison vent. You could have damage. A result of falling into a pit in a natural environment could be a blast of air or toxic fumes or something. So a blast of air may knock a PC up into the air and falling away from their own allies as the pressure is released and they get blasted by the geyser of steam or something like that. So all those things could just be reflavors and reskins by simply changing the damage potential, right? So again, now that we've climbed and scaled our way up, various types of skill challenges involved. I love skill challenges. That was a 4th edition. It wasn't necessarily only reserved for 4th edition, but it was highly. It was used in 4th edition, where you use, in order to succeed in something, you need to have so many successes to achieve your goal. So, for example, let's say you have 10 obstacles to climb the outside skin of the Caldera, and in order to avoid, being waylaid by 10 or more obstacles, you need to achieve. This is just an example. As the DM, you could say, okay, you need to achieve, as a group, 3 successes or more to get there, and each failed success means you're going to encounter yet one more obstacle to overcome, whether it's again, dangerous blasts of heat, falling rocks. It could be molten lava spilling down on them. It could be hot blasts of steam, et cetera, et cetera. Now, once we've gotten to the top of our caldera, because that's where we're headed, we have ourselves 2 more of our elemental features. So we talked about our earth features. I talked a little bit about our fire features, but we do have air and water. Now, the air itself, whether they've ascended to the point where the air is thin, and so that might be a problem, such as like breathing in thin air, breathing in toxic fumes. Maybe there's a chance that exhaustion is a possibility, a great hazard if breathing in the thin air. And depending on how you use the environment, you can use that as a great tension timer. You guys know me; I love tension timers. Tension timers are a tool we can use to prevent analysis paralysis, right? Because if the player characters feel that they can rest and recoup and think about something, the longer they know they can think about a thing, the more chances they have of wading in the water, of turning their heels, of thinking and rethinking and then overthinking and then going in a big giant circle back to square one and reassessing a thing. They're going to do that over and over again until the proverbial someone opens up the door and starts firing a gun at them. And that's what attention timer is for. It's to get it motivated. Like, sure, PCs, you can sit on the side of the mountain for 8 hours for a rest, but you do realize every hour there's a chance you may get struck by an errant bolt of lightning, or the ground may shake yet again, and a rift might split open, and a chasm or rocks or lava might flow on top of you. Sure, every hour there's a chance some kind of dangerous wandering creature or elemental feature might come by. Maybe there's, so on and so forth. And that's where the classic wandering monster thing came from. The fact that, yes, you can rest in a dungeon if you want to, but the chances are you're not going to be very successful at it, considering that the idea of wandering encounters may come past you during the time that you're trying to gain those rests. Deadman says fourth edition had skill challenges in the core book. Fifth edition is the same. Third edition had them in one of the supplements. Yeah, the fact of the matter is, much like people make a big ado about passive perception being a thing, all of these things have already existed since day one. They were just not codified. For example, in the 5th edition core rules, passive perception isn't the only passive element. Every single skill has a passive nature to it, and it's basically the idea of codifying the fact that you don't need to roll for everything. As a game master, you can just say, you know what, your character probably knows this. If we just take 10 and skip past all the die rolls because it's not very interesting, the failure of you not knowing a thing or not sensing a thing or not achieving a goal or not, forcing the rogue to climb up to a higher ledge isn't important. The fact of the matter is the rogue's good enough. You've got enough time, energy, and resources to do the thing. Why bother? So every game for every character and all their skills has the passive ability to do the thing, and that's basically by game masters going, you know what, it's not even important for you to roll. You know how to build a house. Don't roll to build the house. Just build it. If you were going to make a mistake, you would have probably had the time, energy, and resources to correct your mistake. So failure isn't important in this context. And so, much like skill challenges, you can at any period of time in any game system for any reason, you can establish skill challenges. Hey, you've got half a day to get to a safe place before the storms come in from the during storm season, right? Make a number of survival skills, athletic skills, intelligence checks, investigation checks to get to a safe haven. If you don't get a number of those checks, then you fail to get there, right? It's a skill challenge. Skill challenges can be also against the environment itself, one-on-one. And a very simple example is make an athletics check to jump across the chasm, right? That is a skill challenge. That is a challenge to get across. And for me, as your self-appointed third pillar-ist in the tabletop RPG community, using the dice to make a skill check, I feel, should be elevated to the exact same status as making a die check to strike a monster or escape a spell effect, right? You're still rolling, classic D20 systems. You're still rolling a D20, adding or subtracting or using modifiers to achieve an end result. Same thing with the skill challenge. For some reason, we have, and in many games, there seems to be a separation of the two. But if we accept the fact that since we're rolling the same dice, we want similar outcomes, that we can use things that are non-combative, or at least not directly combative, to have the same effectiveness in our games. And then that allows us to use yet another vector to challenge our players, where it's not just a matter of, oh, well, it's an 8-hour trip, we have to have 8 monster encounters. No, if it's 8 encounters doing an 8-hour trip, each of those encounters does not need to be with a monster and picking the right CR, challenge rating or something. It's not about that. It's about what challenges are in front of the players and which players are allowed to, get that spotlight. So we've gotten to the top of our caldera, and we've got our, air and water challenges. So again, high winds are a thing. Poisonous gases are a thing. Fog clouds moving in. Hot steam. Again, those geysers and such could move in. When we talk about using the environment to affect the world, when you're at high altitudes and a storm rolls in and there's high winds have many dramatic effects on the human body, whether it is the winds are subtle enough that if a player character is trying to light a fire or create a fog cloud or heck read a scroll or something like that, winds can be loud enough that you can't hear your allies doing a thing, whether it's hearing an enemy sneak up on you or hearing the rocks shake and collapse around you. Of course, you'll feel it, but you may not hear it. The idea that's with high winds and storms, there are, of course, storm clouds and errant lightning bolts and static electricity, as well as the fact that wind has a dramatic effect on physical ranged things, whether you're, I don't know, blasting fire out of your hands like a flamethrower, or you're firing an arrow or a crossbow bolt, or throwing a grenade or lobbing a Molotov cocktail or something like that. The wind can have a dramatic effect on those things as well. If the wind's strong enough, you could literally be lifted up off of your perch and tossed randomly or in a particular location, or if you're like in a wind tunnel, if you lose your footing or your grip, you can slide. And the way I'm talking about the environment should not be specifically a thing that only affects the PCs. While this might be a little more complicated to apply to your adversaries, I think it should have as equal an effect on your adversaries based on their particular adaptation. Right? If the PCs are, going after the classic, kidnapped prince and princess, and they're captured by some kind of goblinoid horde, and they happen to come upon a caldera and they're trying to climb up. Should some of them get crushed by rocks on their climb? Sure. Should some of them pass out from the thin atmosphere while they're trying to get into their goblinoid rage or something like that? Of course. Could a PC kick one of them into that lava flow that they just crossed, that took them a while to cross over or something? Absolutely. Remember that classic pit trap? Maybe a chasm opened up, or there's thin ground or something, and the PC's tenderly tiptoe over the thin ground, but later someone choke slams a bugbear through the thin ground down into the lava flowing below them. Hell yeah. The environment is a great place to have some of your great cinematic action, and letting the player characters use and abuse the environment, as well as your NPCs and adversaries, I really advocate for. So now we've gotten into the caldera, we got past all the storm clouds, we avoided our being struck by lightning or something, and we're now down into the bowl of the caldera. So now we have our water element, and our water element could be a pristine lake, and now we get to open up our books and pull out our aquatic rules. And this is where a lot of times games have a very difficult way of representing where common sense and the rules sometimes start to conflict with each other. And this is where, as a game master, you might need to adjudicate fairly and consistently when it comes to utilizing skills and abilities and creatures and monsters and spell abilities, and capabilities as well. It would be daunting to have a list of every single spell and its effects in an aquatic environment, but you, as the game master, are going to have to adjudicate that. Like, for example, I believe they listed in Xanathar's guide that if you try to use a verbal component spell underwater, you may do so once, and then you automatically start suffering the drowning/suffocation rules, right? Maybe there is visual distance based on how much particulate is in the water. It are are you using encumbrance rules when player characters try to swim or float on the water or things of that nature? What how many different types of character racial types can are buoyant? Are your dwarves buoyant, or do they sink to the bottom? Does this have any effect on their ability to hold their breath? What if you are a mechanical, warforged, gearforged, artificial being? Do you have to breathe water? Are you buoyant as well? The default usually is yes, you're buoyant, but you also need to hold your breath unless you're an artificial being. But that is completely dependent upon what the group seems to understand. So remember that set people talking about session zero. Session zero doesn't need to be the zero doesn't need to come before the one. It could be like, oh, we're going to go into an aquatic region. Ooh, we didn't talk about this. Hey guys, how about we come up with this is how I'm going to adjudicate it. Your Warforged cannot float, but you don't have to worry about drowning. Oh, okay. That's get a consensus on the table and then just be very consistent with it. There's something else that I think sometimes we tend to overlook when it comes to the environment. And when it comes to like death saves and healing and things, and I think we tend to overlook it. Hey, Dante, us. I like applying a static stasis penalty, like sickened to an area, and extra penalties as time is spent. Caldera sulfur would be nasty, for instance. Exactly. Maybe I might not hold this off till the end. When it comes to using the environment, there are a number of ways to apply the environment in various manners. I'm not sure exactly how to describe this, but I will tell you. Much like we have different types of combat, different types of social interactions, there are different types of ways we can interact with the environment. The most basic of which, as Dante has said, is static. A static event basically means when you are in the area, this event happens. So if you are in a poison, let's say you're in a fog cloud, the dark clouds have rolled in, you've gotten to the top of the caldera, and smoke or fog or mist or something lays on the area. So when you're in the mist or fog, let's say you have disadvantage on visual perceptions and range. That's a static effect, right? If you're in it, you have the thing. When you leave it, you don't have the thing. Static effects can be, I don't know, stepping into fire, let's say. When I'm standing in the fire, I'm burning. When I step out of the fire, I'm not, right? So static effects are that way. But we also have other things. Timed effects, random effects. We have stimulated effects or if-then effects, as well as escalating effects. We have moving effects, moving slash targeted effects as well. So random effects are when I'm in the area, a random thing may happen to me. If you're standing in a caldera and there are random, spurts of like sulfuric acid or something while you are floating on some kind of boat or something like that at the top of the caldera, then that means, let's say everyone rolls a die, and you roll a d6. On a 1, you're going to be blasted by the sulfuric acid, belch or something from under the thick membrane of the caldera lake or something, right? Or you are you're inside the bowl of the caldera, but the rock is you could see it crumbling above you. Of course, you're foreshadowing this happening before you do it. So maybe there's a random chance you might get struck in the head by crumbling rock or something. So, and that randomizer for critical hit publishing for the cinematic environments, we use something called even the odds. Basically, grab a random die. When the round starts, you roll a die. You want to even the odds. If you roll an even die, you won't be targeted. If you roll an odd number, you will be targeted for that time. And that could be lava being spewed out and you might get hit with some, a heavy rock or something like that, etc. Dante says, It lets me get away with using smaller challenge rating encounters, which can be easier to use as a DM, but still give enough tough encounter by CR by having the encounter adapted without the penalty. Exactly. This is again. This is. I feel like using the environment is a tool that's like deep down in the toolbox we haven't reached into or used even yet or seen someone else use. So you can have those, again, the classic goblinoids, right? They tend to be the yawn encounter when it comes to fantasy gaming, right? Like, oh, are there orcs again? French toast. So yeah, that could be the boring encounter unless those orcs are attacking the player characters while they're on a they're like in a minefield of some sort where the ground could crumble at any moment when they take a step, or there's like hot gases or flames shooting up out of the ground and no one knows what's going to happen, and then the orcs are on the other side of this dangerous field and they're shooting at them or throwing javelins at them, right? Like, do you dash across the field knowing that it'll only take you 2 skill checks to not have your foot crumble bust through the crumbling earth and have a gout of flame or acid, river flow below you? Or do you walk slowly knowing that you might take twice as long, like 4 skill checks, but maybe if you're moving at your half speed, you have an advantage on those checks, but if you dash, you have disadvantage, right? Like, for me, using the environment and putting the danger into the player's hands. The classic rope bridge is a perfect example of putting the danger into the player's hands. Sure, you can run across the rickety old rope bridge, but you're probably going to have a far more difficulty doing it, but make less rolls to get across, whereas the person being careful is going to take you longer, but you might have to move slower, so that's why it takes you longer. So, and letting the players pick and choose their hazards. And then again, typical goblinoids, great, sure, we could fight on a flat plane, but what about a sword fight, on a rope bridge? And sure, there's enemies on one side or the other about to set the bridge on fire or hack at it with an axe or something. Like, what do you do? Does your wizard blast the orc with the battle axe with the magic missile, knowing that you're going to have to release your hands to cast the spell while you're on the rickety bridge in the high winds? Or do you hold on for dear life and hope that the orc doesn't cut the ropes by the time you get to the other side, And then PCs working together. For me, the environment is the place where those challenges and challenges lowercase and uppercase C really take place. So escalating challenges are ones where, like a room that's flooding. Again, we're in our Caldera, right? Maybe there's flame that's sweeping across the area, or there's algae that's growing in a particular region that's, some kind of kudzu that's growing towards the player characters or something. Maybe the player characters have delved down into the dungeon of underneath this calderic mountain, and there's waterfalls that are filling up different types of cavities or rooms or something, or there's an aquifer that's been busted, and maybe there's as the room starts to fill with water, it starts to escalate. Maybe there's a collapse, and sure, it's little pebbles at first, but maybe eventually the ceiling will collapse in. So an escalating encounter, the most classic escalating encounter I can think of is Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, when they are in the caverns of Mordor, and the Fellowship is going down the, of course, railing-less steps. Man, the health and safety of dwarves just boggles the mind. I swear, they just do not apply their construction to that. But I joke. I'm being facetious. So as they're running down the old ancient steps in the Dwarven Hold, it becomes more and more difficult for them to escape the goblins that are shooting at them, or throwing javelins or firing at them with crossbows. I can't remember, but you get it, right? So okay, they get to a small gap in the steps. What do? They make their athletics checks and whatnot to jump across. They go down the steps even further. What happens? Oh, the gap is larger. Going to have to start throwing some of the give them a little wedgie, toss across, right? A little bit of help action there. Up, they get to a place where it's even wider now. And what other effect is there? Oh, the enemies are shooting at them. Who stops to shoot back at the enemies or tries to jump across the is it Moria, not Mordor? Sorry. Thank you there, dead man. Yeah, the ancient caverns of Moria. I'm butchering the pronunciations, I'm sure. But again, that doesn't take away the fact that I don't know why you would construct a place and then go, hand railings? Nah, we don't need those. Although let's be honest, as we've gone into science fiction, handrails tend to be a thing that even the Empire seems to lack. Thank you, dead man. Posting in the Discord Moria in the fiction of J.R.R. Tolkien. Moria, also named Khazad. Khazad-dûm is an ancient subterranean complex in Middle Earth. I did a terrible rendition of that. Dante says no OSHA in Middle Earth, but it would make a good dwarf name for an axe. OSHA. You mean when I strike my axe, I make handrails? 3 times a day, give me my Arcana check. So anyway, the idea of an escalating challenge is one, of course, squirrel, where we go back to where something is starting to happen where, sure, it's not a big deal now, but if we stay still here, it could get very, very worse. Yeah, Tesla's like, force fields, which will be installed next week. Yeah, maybe the creators are like, I'm going to be a stormtrooper if I can just practice my gun skill. No time for handrails. So the not only are there escalating challenges, which flooding room is an excellent one. A fire spreading in a burning building. Here in our caldera, it could be a flooding chamber. Again, it could be a room or a chamber filling with poisonous gases, and it gets worse and worse. Maybe a skill challenge to climb a place might be far more difficult. Maybe the saving throw to avoid the collapsing ceiling gets worse and worse because you're in this place. Maybe the swimming out of the flooding chamber becomes far more difficult with that athletics check because there's less and less space to move and less air to breathe as the flooding chamber gets filled. So you have escalating challenges. We also have stimulated challenges or if-then challenges. I use the if-then in the cinematic environments. The idea is that it's very simple. If a PC does a thing, then a thing will happen. So the idea is that, yes, you can avoid the danger, but if you avoid the danger, it requires you to perform or maintain some kind of thing. Whereas the then part of the if, then the danger will happen if you do not do a specific or a generalized thing to avoid the danger. An example would be, let's take smoke, right? We understand that if you stop drop, not necessarily have to roll, but smoke is a challenge. Not only is it a visual hazard, but breathing it in is very difficult. But if you put a cloth, possibly water drenched cloth over your mouth, then you will have a greater chance of being able to not, suffocate and die by breathing in the particulates and smoke, right? Or if you hold on to the handrails, I'm joking about the handrails, but you're crossing that rope bridge, then you have a greater chance of getting across the other side. But when you're doing the if part, there's usually some kind of limitation. Your hands are being like climbing up a cliffside, right? You're climbing up the cliff, so if you hold on to the ropes and have a handhold, then there's a greater chance you won't be dislodged by falling rocks or enemies throwing rocks down from above, but your hands are also occupied, right? Diving underwater. If you decide to cast a spell underwater that requires a verbal component, then you'll probably start drowning. Something else that I think is often not utilized in the environment that's in the back pocket as a game master, one of the air quotes problems with 5th edition is that it is heavily weighed in favor of the PCs just getting healed and popping back up. But what we fail to realize, I think, sometimes when you use the environment is that that's not always the case. An example would be when you drowned, according to the rules, that when you start drowning, your PC drops, or a PC, or basically NPC as well, drops to 0 hit points and you start making death saves, right? The problem is that if you try to heal someone who's dropped to 0 hit points while they're drowning, instantly the very next moment they will continue to start drowning. So an example would be, and this can apply to any particular region for any reason. So player characters are in the Caldera, there's poisonous gases, someone starts to choke, up they fail their saving throw, maybe they pass out, they start dying, maybe the poisonous gases cause physical harm, maybe acidic damage or something like that. One player character's like, oh, I've got healing, I heal you, I don't know, you've dropped to 0. I'm going to heal you by 5 hit points or something like that. Great, okay. You healed them 5 hit points. They take a deep breath. Boom. They start drowning again. Right? Oh, they're drowning. I'm going to use Spare the Dying and stabilize them. Okay. So you stabilize them. The minute you stabilize them, they are unconscious. And what are they? Underwater. Now they're drowning. Right? Now, someone could make the case that maybe my Spare the Dying is putting someone in stasis, or my character has some kind of, I don't know, force field ability around a injured or damaged into a PC or something. But the environment itself could very easily negate the death saves. I mean, sorry, the healing that's involved, forcing them to make those death saves. For example, if you are combating someone and you're fighting on, okay, you're fighting on a plane that's in a volcanic region, so there's gouts of flame, poisonous gases, geysers of hot steam going all around you, and a player character gets taken down to 0, and you go, oh, you're gonna have to make a death save. The thing is that when a person is at 0 hit points, not only are they down and incapacitated, but every time they're struck, it's as if there's a critical hit, right? So that means when they are stuck over top of that gout of flame, or breathing in that poisonous gas, or they fall through the crumbling earth and fall down into the lava, they're going to keep starting to take damage. Both of those are criticals. That means they take, what is it? It's equivalent to failing a death save or something. Sorry, I heard something from one of my kitties. Sorry about that. So, again, the environment itself, by virtue of the danger in which they are located in, could very, very easily make things very, very lethal when we apply those rules, and, of course, foreshadowing those very events. Now, I'm sure that the words that I've said, there are some rules and rulings that I probably misquoted, but the long and short of it is, not the specificity of what I've said, but the idea that the environment itself can be a threat, whether it is getting struck and falling off of a cliff, or falling unconscious and drowning, or getting struck so hard and then stumbling into one of those gouts of flames or something like that, or traveling in the Underdark underneath the Caldera, and there's a flooding chamber and you fall down into the flooded chamber and are unable to swim out, or there's a roof collapse while the PCs are trying to navigate a dark a dark cavern, and they don't know where the end is, but behind them it starts to cave in, and one or more of the PCs are taking too long, and now their leg is stuck, and they're trying to hold their breath, but the chamber is filling up with water, and another PC is wondering whether they should, escape the now escalating danger as the rocks start crumbling in on them, or do they grab their friend's hand and duck down into the water and try to wedge get their ankle released and all that kind of stuff. Again, using the environment to increase the action and attention. Now, a very classic escalating danger in used very often in, like, say, video games, and could be used here. This classic one is the ever the ever open portal. And what I mean by that is you have a portal, and I'm using portal very, very generally here, and some kind of challenge comes out of it. Usually monsters, and sometimes it's like one monster, maybe two of them, and maybe it keeps multiplying. Now there's four, now there's 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. Essentially, what happens is there's something in the environment that is either modifying the creatures to make them far more dangerous or adding more adversaries that's making it more dangerous. Thereby, the encounter is not kill it and it kills you. The encounter is you need to achieve some kind of goal. The monsters just happen to be there as a side effect of where you are. So an example would be, since we are using we've talked about elementals, or at least I've talked about elementals being in and around a caldera. Let's say that there's some kind of flaming elemental coming out of a flaming geyser that's in one portion. You've gotten to the top of the caldera. You're thinking there's a lake, but it's not really. It's not quite like a mono environment. Maybe there's rivers of acid. There's flame. There's crumbling rock. There's like salts. There's sulfur chunks and all that kind of stuff. And maybe there's a big flame just shooting out of the ground. Yeah, I saw your comment there, Dante, talking about OSHA automatically casts Featherfall, Featherfall in mines. Take that, you filthy environment. Yeah, what's that in Eberron? The ever-present Featherfalls in the city of Sharn. Yeah, they're like, we don't need handrails, we've got Featherfall. The 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 idea of a big flame jetting out of the ground, and the flame keeps, I don't know, every round or every other round or every 1 die 6 or something like that, a fire elemental comes out of this flaming aperture. You go, okay, one fire elemental comes out, and then next round another one comes out, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one. And sure, are there some PCs that could stand there and start taking out, one-shotting fire elementals? Yes. But if it's an escalating encounter, maybe it's 1 and 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then 5. And maybe the purpose is not to defeat the fire elementals. Maybe it's to get to the other side. The fire elementals just happen to be in the way to get to the MacGuffin. A MacGuffin could, it could get to the locked door and open up the locked door. It's to break the bars of the cage that you're in while something's coming after you. It could be getting to saving a person, casting the ritual, prying the magical gem out of the forehead of the statue. It could be sneaking past an even larger enemy. It could be getting to a place where you can move a stone to trap your enemies back where the fire elementals are coming out of, right? It could be any number of these encounters where the encounter itself is not the purpose. The point is to achieve a goal in the encounter. The monsters just happen to be a side effect. And going back to something that I promote a lot, which are triangles. Triangles of encounter, where you have player characters, you have your enemies, and then you have a goal. And for some reason or other, your enemy wants you to stop the goal, or maybe the enemy wants to achieve the same goal. Whoever achieves the goal wins. And so you have some other purpose involved, usually defaulting to some story element involved. Irregardless of the combat just happens to be the challenge to achieve the goal. And that goal could be getting to a particular location, grabbing a particular item, saving a particular life, hacking a particular door, something like that. Yeah, Deadman says like Pacific Rim, 1 kaiju, then 2, ... Yeah, exactly. Where, oh yeah, I'm a badass. I'm in my giant robot. I could take out a kaiju in a couple of punches, right? Bang, 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 boom, down. You turn around and you're like, ooh, they've separated into 2, or something's come out of the aperture and now an even larger kaiju, and you're like, yeah, the purpose is not to fight the kaiju, which is true. The purpose is to get the nuclear weapon down into the aperture where the kaiju are coming out of, right? And Captain America Winter Soldier, Okay, is it fighting Bucky? Yeah, but no. It's getting the chip into the floating automated helicarriers before they start assassinating everyone. Right. That is a well used trope, but I feel like it is well used in other media, but not used in our own tabletop games. Usually, it's get to the big bad, let's fight the big bad, and we're done. Not that there's anything wrong with fighting a big bad, but it may be that there's something in the environment that's absolutely helping the creatures, right? Let's say there are three fire elementals. Okay, no big deal. Flat plane, PCs fight fire elementals fight them. But what if the flame that's shooting out of the ground, the fire elemental passes through the flame and heals the fire elementals? Or an injured fire elemental walks through the flame and splits into two more fire elementals, right? So it could be that there's something in the region that the PCs, if they mitigate the thing that's helping their enemy, then they have a greater chance of defeating their enemy. Ogre's like, no, the big bad needs to be fought. It's in their nature to be fought. For some reason, I'm picturing it written on like distressed but very ancient and tough parchment for some reason. Complete with like scroll rolls or something. It says here that thy big bad must be fought with thy sword and spell. Like a big old poster board. All the enemies and good guys are clocking in. Like, hey George, hey, what's going on there, Pete? Going to fight the big bad today? Yeah, it says it right there, right next to the OSHA rules with the handrails. Tesla says, how easy would it have been for Bucky to just crush that computer card? Okay, really, Tesla? Really? You're going to point out the obvious? I swear. But yes, you're right. Hell, we might even have to talk about MacGuffins at some point because, you know, listen. When it comes to certain things, like say, our classic action movies where they have to achieve a certain goal to achieve a certain thing, we go, yeah, that's a really good story. Wait a minute, couldn't they have just done this thing to stop this other thing? Right? And you're like, yeah, no. Like, I don't know. We could start talking about the Avengers and all those stones that Thanos was going after, and the idea that, like, oh, let's collect the majority of them on Earth because that's safe. Instead of like dropping them to a sun or a black hole or something like that, right? But whatever. Yeah, player characters think about those things. Sometimes when you write a story, you don't think about that till afterwards. And yes, you are absolutely positively correct. Bucky could have very easily just snatched it off of Cap's belt and crushed it in his cyber arm before he even knew it, right? Because they were like somewhat equal. But again, using the environment to our advantage is a good thing, especially if you want to have like a running combat, which is it's problematic to do it in role playing games, but I think the end results are better. A running combat to me is basically moving from one environment to another. And it could literally be running, like physically running, mounted combat, on something that moves through different environments. Car chases are a perfect example of moving from one environment to another. Airships, hell, mine carts. A running combat is basically one in which, through, again, using this as a tool in your back pocket, PCs are fighting enemies, but the environment that they're in starts changing. So PCs are on rocky flat plane fighting enemies. All of a sudden, the ground starts to shake and it shatters, and they fall through to a chamber below, and then they start fighting. Now that they're fighting, not only are they fighting on horizontally, but now there are various vertical environmental changes they have to worry about. Like, for example, PC fights NPC troll. All of a sudden, the ground breaks apart and they fall down. So now PC is up higher than PC troll below them. Do they try to close the gap by jumping doing a diving jump off? Do they try to scale down? Do they try to push a rock on top of the troll? Does the troll try to, climb up after the PC? Does the troll run away because they see an open cavern? So on and so forth, right? Using height changes. Maybe this escalating challenge that the environment that the PCs are in becomes so dangerous that even the enemy realizes that it's dangerous to do a thing, right? Pet Ogre's like, Bucky equal to Captain America? Heretic! Captain America! Corridor Crew and Winter, what is it? Is it Winter Soldier done with no. Civil War, rated R Civil War. Yeah. yeah. Dante's like, airship battles, so crunchy. Yeah, airship battles. I'm going to jump from one airship that's at a higher elevation onto the deck of the other airship. What do I need to do? Now, some of you have heard me talk about this when it comes to gritty, like realistic, gritty, and cinematic action. And how do you adjudicate such things when it comes to PC and NPC interactions and skills and such? Usually what I default to are one of two things. One thing is that, yeah, airship battles need to be arrow flinned. I hear you, Ogre. All right, so getting into some mechanics here, and I'm not a very crunchy person. This channel isn't very crunchy. It's usually very smooth, like soft serve ice cream. The idea is that either A, you add no modifiers to what a player character wants to do, but you leave it very narrative. So an example would be, my player character wants to move 30 feet to close the distance to the other NPC. My barbarian wants to close distance with troll, right? But describing how you close that distance, you just make a 30-foot move, boom, you get close distance. But describing it, you can describe it as flashy as you want to, but you apply no penalties, no modifiers. So an example would be, I run towards him and strike him with my axe. Cool. Or a player character says, I run at an angle away from the troll, take 1, 2, 3 steps off the rocky wall, leap into the air, and I'm going to strike at the troll as my arc of a leap comes down on top of him, right? That's a descriptive, that is a descriptive description of a movement of just closing a distance of 30 feet, but you've applied nothing. So essentially, I use a rule, I move 30 feet straight, but I'm describing it in a very cool way. It's the swing on the chandelier, Errol Flynn thing, right? It's the duck, dodge, slip between the legs, strike them in the back kind of thing, where you're not applying any modifiers, you're just using words to describe what's going on. The limitation of that, the advantage of that is you get to do very, very cinematic things. The limitation is that while you are describing lots of things, you have to be aware that you are neither benefiting nor getting any drawbacks from your description. So if you say, I slip between the troll's legs and try to strike him from behind, the rogue still does not get backstabbing free just because they described themselves slipping between the legs. It is just, I'm making an attack. Now, if circumstances has it that player character has the ability to backstab, you could describe it that way. Oh, the paladin is facing the troll while the troll's distracted by the paladin pulling out his flaming sword. I slip between his legs and strike him from behind, right? So you could describe a player character action that way. The other method of doing cinematic action is this one. And this one's a little crunchier, but I feel sometimes we fail on this. And that is the idea of I run along the ledge of the cavern and do a diving leap off of the cavern and land on the troll, right? To try to stab him in the throat or in the neck or something. You might say, oh, make an athletics check or an acrobatics check. The problem with doing that is if they fail, you've applied a barrier to their success, but you are not also equally applying a success to their success, right? So their challenge. So an example is if you're going to apply a difficulty, then they should get some kind of equal and opposite benefit for doing a thing. Now that the benefit for doing the thing might be like, okay, make the acrobatics check to swing on the chandelier, or make the athletics check to slip between his legs. Oh, you did succeed? Okay, then you get to roll an extra die of damage, or you get to make advantage on the attack, or you are not subject to some kind of opportunity attack when you made your running leap onto the troll, even though there's other enemies around. Like, you should offer some kind of benefit to the action if you're going to make a drawback, which the drawback, of course, is the idea that you've added the challenge is that you've added an extra die roll. Adding an extra die roll means that there's a greater chance of failure, which means they should have some greater chance of success. I've even heard of people doing a version of advantage with other die rolls other than a die 20. So I'm going to roll 2d6 for my damage. Game Master says, no, well, you actually made your athletics check when you did your 3-step bounce off the wall to attack the troll. Roll damage twice, take the higher result. Right? You could do something like that. So I'm not advocating that these are the only methods to do it. I'm just saying for cinematic action, especially using the environment or something, I feel like you should either A, don't apply any modifiers at all and just make it descriptive, or if you apply tons of modifiers, allow them to both penalize and then as much of a penalty to add as much of an advantage for them succeeding in doing such a thing. Otherwise, what will happen is it'll be a Pavlov's dog reaction with your player characters. Player character wants to do something cinematic, other player character does not. If you only benefit the person that does not, then the person who wants to do the cinematic action will not do it any longer. And then if that's what you're looking for. So if you're looking for Errol Flynning your games, let them go a little bit wild. I default to not adding any modifiers. Just let it be very descriptive and just have some fun with it, and just let your descriptions lead the charge. But some people want a little bit more crunchiness to it, so I personally don't have a problem with it if somebody wants a little more crunch. Now, when it comes to here's some other things to use the environment. The environment, especially like we're talking about Calderas, allows us to allow players to become to be more effective without necessarily being more powerful or causing more damage. 3 fire elementals have assaulted the party. Everyone's like, oh my god, that gout of flame is spitting out fire elementals. Okay, my character's can't really do much against the fire elementals. Can I help push a boulder on top of the gout of flame that's getting more and more fire elementals attacking us? Yes, you can. So who's more effective? Is it the bard and the cleric that push a boulder on top of the gout of flame that prevents 30 more fire elementals, basically taking out 30 fire elementals from getting on the battlefield? Or is it the barbarian that's one-shotting 1 fire elemental at a time, right? The environment can be used to make something more effective. If the PCs are down inside of the subterranean portions of the Caldera, knowing that there are caverns that are filling with fluid or something, and one of them is like, can I use a lightning bolt to instead of firing at the enemies, to fire at the rock above and have it collapse down on the aquatic Sahogan or something that live inside of the mountainous part of this caldera? Sure, why not? Let them use and abuse the environment to their effect. Punching the ogre in the throat and having him gulp in some of that poison gas that's starting to choke everyone out. Why not? Having some kind of acid spill on them by shooting a lightning bolt at some rock above the troll, and then the pool of acid that was up there that the PCs navigated around starts to spill down on the enemies below them. Heck yeah. Ogre's like shies away, like, ooh, maybe not, right? So the idea of letting the PCs use and abuse the environment, something that I also think that tends to be a thing that's not often done with traps or layers in gaming is that sorry ogre yeah, yeah, maybe not punch ogres in the throat. Okay, I hear you, pet. Pet ogre's like, please don't punch me in the throat. Wait, why are you pointing me out? Yeah, but you get my point, right? Like just allow. Okay, classic traps: spike trap, pit trap, swinging pendulum blade trap, crushing walls trap, or ceiling trap that collapses in. Yeah, okay, they can be fun. They can be fun, but PC that comes up with the great idea of shooting away at the rocks to allow the acidic lake that the PCs narrowly were able to circumvent and then using that to their advantage later on in the battle, I think is far more rewarding both as a game master, your PC's paying attention to what's going on, and taking out the enemies, allowing a PC who may not be as effective being very effective in the game, I feel is far more of a rewarding method to use than, oh, you avoided the trap, okay, keep on going, and the trap becomes some other forgotten element in your world, right? Dante says, in short, consider it a good day when rocks fall and the enemy group all dies for a change. Yeah. Also, listen, there are, I understand there's some game masters out there that are like, oh, they took out my big bad in one shot. I get that. But then on the other hand, there are some fights where we're inwardly we're like rolling our eyes, like, could we just get this battle over? I didn't mean for this to be a slog. Would somebody please just knock the rocks down on the goblinoid so we can just move the story on? Right, there are those periods of times, and maybe using the environment might be a little bit of a hint, right? Like, hey wizard, roll an intelligence investigation check. Wizard's like, why? Game Master's like, because I'm trying to give you a hint to get the hell out of here, right? Again, toolkit, right? Toolkit. Sometimes you need to do that. Other times, maybe you want, like Dante said, maybe you want to have some of these smaller enemies be more effective. Kobolds, anyone? Right? You want these little smaller enemies to be more effective, so when they start cornering the PCs in at the rope bridge with the acid lake below them, with the high winds coming in and lightning bolts striking them, and you start stacking all these elements on top of each other, and the PCs aren't bothering to navigate their way out of it. You're just like, dude, I foreshadowed all this stuff way ahead of time, guys. It's your fault that you didn't bother engaging in the environment. So, yeah, Cameron says, I had a request for traps that were reusable from a player. It's a bit fun, but complicated way of thinking about trap design. Yeah, oh, yeah, exactly. I get that we don't do this, but why wouldn't a rogue reset a trap to be used later on? Why not? It's there, it's usable. Why would you prevent a player from doing it? And why not? That's what PCs do, right? If my PC is a trap setter and I got a trap in front of me, why wouldn't I use it to my advantage? And again, the classic mechanical trap is a mainstay of classic Dungeons and Dragons, but the environment is very much that way too. How many times have I said it's not being attacked by the alligator? It's being attacked by the alligator in a swamp that makes it dangerous. It's not just that the shark is dangerous; it's being bitten by a shark in the middle of the ocean that quadruples the danger of that thing, right? Yeah, I don't want my leg bitten off, but I also don't want to drown. I don't want to be barrel rolled by alligator, and I really don't want to be barrel rolled in a nasty old swamp as well. So, lots of monsters and little beasties use the environment to great effect. Lots of felines will jump on you from a high advantage. Lots of birds will dive bomb you from a high aerial point. There are many animals that will heck throw things at you, or strike from a hidden location, or wait until dark, or heck, wait until you're injured to jump on you. I'm looking at you, jackals and hyenas, right? They're going to separate you from the group. Hopefully, you're either the slowest one or the most injured one, and then they'll pack tactic you and jump on you from their most advantageous point and your most disadvantageous point. And so, yeah. Yeah, Ogre's like, yeah, traps shouldn't be in the Grimtooth style of traps. They're cute. Don't get me wrong; those are classic and cute Grimtooths traps where it's like the pendulum, seesaw floor where if the PCs move too far against the hallway, it slips down and you fall in the fire, or the shrinking door trap where you go down the hall, you step on a thing, you get shrunk down and go through a slide, and then you grow to normal height, but the tube you went through was the size of a mouse or something. Like those are cute. And listen, I'm not against using them. Listen, I am not against them, but they tend to be singular events, in my opinion, rather than rather than sailing across the acidic lake of a caldera, being attacked by some kind of acidic monster that comes out of the region, and one of the player characters comes up with an idea. It's like, "Ooh, is that gas flammable? I think so, yeah. Can I light it on fire with my produce flame since I really don't have any other ranged attacks or something?" And you're like, "Sure, why not?" It's the fighting on the frozen lake. You get to the top of the caldera, it's a frozen lake, and you're fighting enemies on it. And someone's like, "I'm gonna take my battle axe and shatter the ice and have the enemies fall into it as we all balance on top of like a broken ice shelf or something," and using that. Or, hey, my character is going to take the chance and tackle the ogre into the frozen lake, and try to stab the ogre as we both descend down into the depths of the frozen waters or something, and see who comes out first, right? It's using the environment, making it, because your environment should be your story. If your player characters are going to the mysterious evil caldera, they should be involving and intermingling and mixing in with the elements of the caldera itself, as opposed to getting to the top of the caldera and then we're there looking at a flat plane, a green screen, essentially, where no matter what you're describing behind them, none of it has an effect. So now I'm not suggesting every single encounter should always have these elements. I'm just saying toolbox, right? So before we get out of here, Cameron says, I've always wanted to create a game where you have to direct a pack of like African wild dogs on a hunt. Their tactics and communication are amazing, and it seems like it takes true strategy ahead of time. If you've ever seen, you must watch the same nature shows that I do, and when you see some of these animals and their tactics, you're almost thinking there's no way they're doing this without an actual language, right? Like it's not just pack tactics like pile on a rabbit. They literally like will separate into groups and time their attacks as if they were like on radios, like, all right, Wild Dog 387. Yeah, this is Wild Dog 387. What are you? Hey, this is Wild Dog 52. You're gonna attack in 3.8 seconds. Roger, that is. Roger, we've got him in sight. I mean, it seems like they actually do those things, and that's just one type of animal. They've gotten aerial footage of when you see like packs of hyenas, and they'll run after prey, and then they'll split off, knowing that the center group will like try to exhaust their prey while the others circle around, waiting for the opportune moment. It's crazy, but it's cool to see that. Yeah, Cameron says, sorry, off topic, but the environment around them is heavily involved in them making a kill. It sure is. And running down prey to a raging river, or up against a cliffside, or into sharp brambles, or through muddy ground or something like that is used by even the most animalistic predators. Why wouldn't we use that as player characters, right? Why wouldn't an enemy goblinoids force the player characters to have to run through thick muddy ground in a swamp? Or why wouldn't they push the player characters in the caldera towards an acid lake, with their back against an acid lake, and what do they do if they're trapped there? Or forcing them down into a gorge where the enemy's above them and can knock down rocks on top of their heads and trap them inside of something. Like, why wouldn't they do that? Of course they would do that. There's a field of spewing out hot steam and gouts of flame. Of course they would force them into the minefield of something like that. So using the environment, and a smart player character will absolutely twist that around. So much like using a layer, where in the game they do have layers and layer actions. Instead, what I advocate is the layer itself should be neutral. It should not should be. In many ways, it can be, especially if it's extremely natural, right? Where the layer itself is the environment. This creature just happens to live there because it benefits that particular creature. But any other creature could live in a swampy lair, right? Or any creature could live in a mountainous lair, or a desert-style lair, or a frozen tundra lair, and using it to their advantage. And if a player character is skilled enough to use it for their benefit, sure, why the hell not? So anyway, guys, thank you very much for helping me, help me keep this channel alive. So thank you very much for joining me on this Third Pillar Thursday. Please join me tomorrow on Future Friday, where we talk about Eclipse Phase, Altered Carbon, and transhuman science fiction gaming. Anyway, guys, thank you very much. Have a great day, and I will see you later. Thank you so much. Bye. Thanks for